Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage. It's a Friday afternoon. I got about an hour and I'm gonna mess around with the Race 55 Chevy hardtop. Yesterday, after I moved some stuff around, I was able to put it up in the lift for the first time and get a look underneath. And I'm just further in love with this project. If you're not familiar, I did shoot one video on it already. I still have to make a playlist for it. I should probably do that this weekend so I can start adding videos to that file. Again, I'm totally in love with this thing. I'm happy every day I walk out in the garage and look at it. It is, in my mind, the project that I've been seeking. One of, anyway. As you know, I love projects, but this one is definitely clicks a lot of X's a lot of boxes. So where do you start on a project like this? You don't know how it got to this point. I've using clues that I could see and what I've been told and researched that, you know, the direction it was headed, it was going to be a blown Hemi streetcar before fast streetcars were as common as they are now. I believe it was built long before drag and drive events and stuff like that. But I think the fastest streetcar was getting underway, that movement. That was late 90s. I believe the car was built mid to late 90s. So I'll never know the whole thing, and it really doesn't matter because I'm going to make it my own. But here we are. How do you even start? Where do you start? Well, I've stared at it for an hour or so yesterday, mentally making plans about how I could move forward on the chassis and every other piece of it. The workmanship in this car is unbelievable. I'd love to talk to the guy that, or at least know who got it this far. Person, guy or girl, I don't know. So, I've been down this road before. My Camaro that I raced Top Sportsman with, I had researched it somewhat, but it was still a mystery. And at some point, you just gotta go at it like you're starting to build it from scratch. Although you don't have to. A lot of the work's done, but you have to make it the end result of what you're looking for. So today, I figured I'd start with mocking up a empty Turbo 400 case. Now, I'm not even sure what it's going to have for a powertrain. I do know, because it's a tube chassis car with a flip front end that's removable, I want powertrain options to be completely opportunistic or modular, if you will. The mid plate should stay the same with any Chevy engine. And the front plates, I had a big block Chevy front motor plate in aluminum. I had bought a LS front motor plate. These are raw blanks, so they're drilled out around the water pump and the block, but you know, they're raw around the edges. It's just a piece of rectangle aluminum. So I had big block Chevy and LS covered, and I went ahead and bought a small block Chevy front motor plate, and that'll be here this afternoon according to tracking. And there are no mounts for the front plate. The Mopar plate that I have for the Hemi was just going to sit on the frame rails and probably be hose clamped in like they do in a funny car, and in this case the guy had a top alcoholic dragster. And if you're not familiar with those, the motor plates sit right on the round frame rail with a bracket. There's a hose clamp, holds it to the frame, believe it or not. On the Top Fuel car, that's what holds the engine in. So I took out the Mopar mid plate. A beautiful piece of work. Everything in this car is absolutely machine fit. Everything is marked and drilled and tapped, and whatever they were doing, the guy was definitely a perfectionist, which I like. I mean, this thing fits in like a key. It almost doesn't need bolts when it sits on the frame rail. It's tight to everything. There's another bracket down here, and I've added additional bolts here so that it bolts to the chassis in 4 places. I was just thinking before I started shooting this video that when I'm done marking this plate, I'm going to try the Chevy Bellhausen on here, or just hold the plates up to each other at that point, because this plate will be ready to go, almost. And see if I can make another Chevy plate out of this too, and have twin bolt patterns. I don't know if they tried that. I don't know the story. But I do know I have two mid plates that fit in the car. This Chevy plate, I've had it in both directions. It's, it'll modular, it'll flip either way. Modular apparently is the word of the day. Is that the word I'm looking for? I don't know. Looking at the blue marking compound on the Chevy plate, it's very common for aftermarket blocks like the Oldsmobile, big block Chevy block, Pro Stock block, I think the Rodec maybe, to have a driver's side starter. Now on a Chevrolet, traditionally on the passenger side, this one's marked out for a driver's side starter, and that would make me lose the lower bolt here. Whoop, careful now. So, nothing I have, or probably will have in the future, is going to have a driver's side starter, so I'm just going to go ahead and bore out my hole for my regular Bellhausen bolt. I have some extra long dowels stuck through the 5/8 hole, and I got a bolt in every hole, and I only had to mark this one. I had to mark and drill the top one, because when this car was built, I don't believe LS's existed. And like I mentioned, there's brackets on the chassis, and I've marked and drilled those as well. I'd forgotten all about this one, so now I've marked it all up for the second time using my hole punches. I found one that fit absolutely perfect down in the BTE Bellhausen. I'm just using for a mock-up. And I've punched it, so now I got to drill that hole, and we'll be able to go try it in the car. I believe I just called those hole punches transfer punches. Like I said last night in the video that I made, that every video contains at least one mistake, if not more. It's kind of like, where's Waldo? Well, where's my mistake? Well, there's one. I caught this one, but sometimes I don't. So, multiple engine options for transmission options. Obviously, I build Turbo 400s. I have one all ready to go that I built for myself. One of the 9 I built for the 72 Nova, and I kept selling and buying better parts for mine. I could still improve mine. It would not hurt my feelings to send this one down the road and build a better one. But for today, we'll mark a Turbo 400 in there. The car has a clutch pedal and a slide for a Lenco, I assume. Probably a 3-speed if it was blown alcohol. But I don't know. I am not against a Lenco. If I never had one before, I would be more in favor of it. But I have had one. And while I only drove it minimally around the pits, most of the time I was being towed with a golf cart, it would be interesting on the street, let's just put it that way. And each section of a Lenco, if you don't know what a Lenco is, you can look them up, Lenco Racing Transmissions. You have sections that all look the same, but they can have different ratios. And with all the levers forward, you also have a reverser section, I should mention. It has forward, reverse, and neutral. And you have as many speeds in reverse as you have in forward. It just redirects, makes it turn the opposite way. So it doesn't matter what gear it's in with the reverser. So that's on the back. So the sections ahead, each with the lever forward, is making ratio, if you will. So if it's a 2-to-1 box, that all the boxes are in ratio. So you add them all up, and that would be first gear. When you pull the lever, you drive a wedge. Think of it as an automatic transmission, but instead of a hydraulic piston compressing the clutches, you manually drive a wedge on the backside of the clutches and steels, and you lock that section up 1-to-1. It's no longer making ratio. So that's second gear. Now, each section, like that, if you have one section, you have a 2-speed transmission. If you have 2 sections, you have a 3-speed, and so on and so forth. So I ran a 5-speed, so it had 4 sections, and it's that simple. They're all making ratio, and you just keep making each section, starting at the front of the transmission, 1-to-1. And for whatever reason, Lenco tells you you have to do the burnout with only the forward section. So to do a burnout in a Lenco, the forward section is the lever the furthest away from you, typically the longest, and you pull all the other levers back, and the only one making ratio is the forward one, and then you dump the clutch, and then you pull it in high gear, and that's how you do a burnout with a Lenco. Unless you happen to have like a blown Hemi or something, and you can just do a burnout in high gear, rolling. If you watch the different styles of burnouts, which I do, you'll notice like funny cars and stuff, they roll through the water, hit the throttle, they're already in high gear. That's when you know you got a lot of power. And that's cool. I don't like burnouts when you have to hold the brake. That's lame. So all my buddies have been sending me links to Lencos. I actually found one kind of local, and I was hoping it was more than it probably is, but the jury's still out on that one. So if you're going to race it at a NHRA sanctioned track, or anybody that does tech, the Bellhausen flywheel and all the pieces of the clutch have to be inspected and have new SFI tags every 2 years. And that stuff's heavy. And typically when you send the clutch back, you might as well have them refurbish it. So last time I did that around 2010 with the Lenco that I had, I believe that was $3,500 plus shipping. So that kind of takes the fun out of it. And throughout this whole project, I'm going to mention, I'm going to try to build the chassis to an SFI spec, hopefully 6.0 seconds in the quarter mile. Never intend to go that fast, but the car would be more valuable and safer than anything less than that. But in many videos, and one of the reasons why I want to be a hot rodder and drive this on the street is I don't want to live under the SFI tag umbrella. But I guess I'll have to. At least follow the rule book. I'm not one to put a lot of money in something that is completely out in left field and not going to pass tech anywhere. So not only to please anybody else, but again, I've mentioned this before, when something goes wrong, is not the time to second guess yourself about whether you have the right safety gear. So always err on the safe side. But enough about that. So Lenco's a possibility. Turbo 400 already got in stock. Lenco's a possibility. Now I mentioned I also bought a small block motor plate that's going to be here today. I got it half built, the 421 small block. We worked on it last summer in several videos. And that's going to be a pretty stout motor. And I just bought, don't laugh, that clutchless or clutch assisted, but you can shift it without using a clutch, Rankin T10. That would be a fun combination because this is primarily, at least at first, a street car. So, I mean, I certainly never hurt that rear end and stuff. So, yeah, that'd be interesting. I've considered that. Again, the car is a clutch pedal. I already have this clutchless transmission. I don't know anybody else got a combination like that driving around town, so it might be fun. I mean, probably reasonably quick. It would probably run 9s. That's fast for a street car, at least it used to be. So enough dreaming, let's drill a hole and jam a bunch of stuff under the car, and I'll give you a look under the car. I'm going to assume that the clutch can, or Bellhausen, if you will, that they were going to use and had mocked up in the car had multiple bolt patterns, probably fit a Chevrolet and a Mopar, because the plates now on top of each other are virtually identical. All the holes that would be for the Bellhausen line up. The only thing preventing me from drilling it all Chevy, there's room for all the Chevy ones except for the one I just had to bore where the starter hole was going to be. In the Mopar plate, the starter hole is there. So I'd be delinquent one Bellhausen bolt. But it's also an excellent, pattern, if you will, for if I wanted to make another motor plate, just buy a blank and go, lay it up here and make it just like this one. So I've had to do that before, both out of necessity and convenience. It's fun doing super precision work, or at least trying to do your best work and matching the quality of work that was done. I'm deburring every hole with this countersink. So they all have a nice chamfer on them. Of course, I'm going to be using, with the LS motor, the M10 1.5, so I have to, sorry about the noise, make sure that they fit. They're a machine fit, because these holes were made for 3/8, but it does technically fit. We'll see how it fits with the transmission case in there. Here it is up in the lift. Exciting to see it for the first time. I'll just point out a few highlights front to back. We'll be seeing lots of it. This is the slide mechanism for the front end. There's 4 bolts, 2 high and 2 low. You take out, you slide the entire front end ahead, and then it allows you to either tilt or remove it. It'll tilt and stop right here, and this opening here, I assume you can lift it right off. Haven't done it yet, but that's pretty ingenious. Here's the mid plate bolted in with the transmission bolted to it. I gotta tell you, without dowel pins, life is more difficult. We got her in there. I had to remove the aluminum, I'll call it tin work, but the tin work above the transmission because the BTE housing, the way it's shaped, it fit. It's tight to the firewall up there, but it fit. The OEM Turbo 400 Bellhausen hit. So these pieces, the clutch can would actually bolt on from this side. It's on plane on the inside here, perfectly aligned, so there'd be tabs on the Bellhausen, and they would bolt there to the chassis, thus eliminating the need for a limiter fore and aft to keep the engine from flexing. If you go to take off, the engine's heavy, it stays still, and the car goes forward. And despite the fact that this is 1/4 inch and it's mounted very close to the chassis, I'll still need something, and I'll probably incorporate a tube up to like the original motor mount location to both sides right here. So just, you know, engineering in my head, thinking ahead. The transmission actually fits better than I expected because it clears the clutch linkage. I didn't want to remove that. The existing, what was going to be one of the transmission mounts, there's another one here that came with the car that I won't need at all, but it had slides for the Lenco as well, but this rear one is welded in. And I probably will not use that for the transmission cross member, but it's a good mounting point for the front of my drive shaft enclosure, which will go, I'll run it full length, probably back to here, if you can see my finger. So there's lots of frame rail to attach it to. So in rough measurement, I'm going to have about a 48-inch drive shaft, which is awesome. That's shorter than my Nova. Shows you how much engine setback it has. So again, just mocking stuff up. The 400 fits pretty decent. Continuing on to the back. The way the car is built, it has this extra structure behind the main hoop cross member because the four-link starts way back here. And I find the wishbone to be kind of small. I'll either reinforce it or build a new one. And the sway bar itself looks plenty beefy in the arms, but the rods themselves look kind of small, so I'll have to research what the norm is. I think these brackets are kind of cool. They're canted in wood. I need to find some 14-inch rear coilovers with about 120-pound spring, maybe 120, 130. I'm missing the rear calipers and brackets and the wheel seals, but I have everything else. And for the front strange struts, I'm going to need just calipers and pads and wheel seals and stuff. I have a set of wheelie bars that I'll retrofit onto these existing brackets. It's going to be difficult the way this car sits really low, and the bumper will no doubt have to be notched. Sometimes you have to notch the back of the body as well, so we'll see about that. The entire body does bolt on in multiple places. going forward. Oh yeah, see miles of tire clearance, despite the fact it has a 1736 on it. I like the inspection and fill cover up there. For the drain, they use the same thing, and I'll no doubt change that to a regular pipe plug. Have to weld something else in there. And typically I put a piece of tubing over it to jack on, but this has this pipe right there that is certainly strong enough. But yeah, the body is mounted multiple locations. And the bracket there. So I'll have to pull it off when I finalize the roll cage. But they made some interesting construction choices. Like, see, the rocker bar actually is a U, which is interesting. And there's lots of options. I have to continue this across, but you're allowed to use it as your transmission cross member with diagonals. Lots of studying the book and seeing what is acceptable and what isn't, and what size everything has to be. Well, we're going to call it a day, at least for now. No doubt I'll come back out later on this evening and try to accomplish some things I did not get done today. I started stripping a Turbo 400, and I'm off to a bad start. The mount was held on with 3/8 bolts, wound into the metric M10 1.5 holes. The pan is glued on, and the fasteners are all different lengths, and the threads came out with them, so hopefully the rest of the transmission clears up afterwards. It's a 1988 case. Who knows what'll be inside. So, hope you're having a good Friday night. It's starting to get dark out there. Have a good night, whatever you do. And I'll catch you in a couple days.